When it comes to the public sector, those are people who work in various government departments, from frontline workers like nurses and policemen to the people who make the government departments run, who do all the admin stuff for various government ministers and take policy ideas and turn them into programs which may or may not work. The transparency and integrity of government departments is such an important issue, and particularly not just our politicians who are elected. If we don't like them, we can get rid of them next time. But for career public servants, making sure that we also have transparency in that particular area. Somebody who has done some research and done some submissions on this topic for the Free Speech Union recently. Stephanie Martin joins us now. Steph, kia ora, thanks for your time.
Thank you, Andrew. Lovely to be here as always.
When it comes to, I suppose, integrity and transparency in the public service, it's something which we expect, but it's very difficult to know whether or not we're getting it.
Yes, I think so. I mean, it's an integral part of a democratic system that you have a politically neutral public service that it's really incumbent on them to bring to life the will of the government of the day.
Yep.
So the way that it works, right, is that we as citizens engage in the democratic process, say who we want to elect to be our democratic leaders, and then they go into government, and the public servants are the ones who bring the will of that government in accordance with what people have decided into action. So where we've got issues there, I think we've got issues quite seriously for our democratic system. Actually, it's really important that we have a politically neutral public service in order to do that.
I mean, it does sound like it makes sense, but how practical is that? Because honestly, Steph, I've never met anyone that's politically neutral. Each person brings their own background, their own ideology, their own experience. I presume that most public servants have at least voted for someone, not necessarily the party that their boss is a member of, right?
Yeah, so it would be a tough job, right? I can fully acknowledge that it will be a tough job because essentially what they are being asked to do, public servants, is to come to work every day and to leave their personal politics at the door in order to come into a space where they are enacting the will of the government that they serve.
Yep.
So it would be hard, right? It would be hard if you had a particular political persuasion that you know the government of the day was not in alignment with your own kind of perspectives. But there is a recognition, and this is one of the key public service principles. There is a recognition that part of the role of a public servant is to do that. So it's not to say, of course, I mean, it wouldn't be realistic, I don't think, to say that public servants won't have their own points of view about things. They will. But the idea is that part of what it means to be a public servant is to recognize a separation there between your own perspective and your responsibility and duty as a public servant, to leave that to the side in order to do what the people have demanded to be done.
There is a bit of an integrity issue there already, that if you strongly believe one thing but your boss requires you to do something which is ideologically opposed to that, then there is a conflict of interest ideologically. But it gets problematic when somebody, I suppose, makes the decision to push that to one side, to put that on hold because they want to keep their job. And, hey, that's understandable, but pretending to have certain views in order to keep their job whilst secretly undermining the views, the policy, the ideology of the current minister, then that is hugely problematic.
Yeah, hugely problematic. So that kind of behavior, if we were seeing public servants, and it's very hard to have a clear picture of what's actually going on here, but if we had public servants who were in kind of quiet ways undermining like governmental processes.
Yep.
There's actually a term for this that the Public Service Commission have recently brought up in one of the submissions that we've done for the Future of Public Service Integrity Long-Term Insights briefing paper.
Wow.
That's a bit of a mouthful, isn't it? Yeah. So one of the terms that they've brought up in that I think is really important is the idea of democratic backsliding.
Mm-hmm.
And what that basically means is people who are within government itself who are kind of undermining the process of democracy by the little kind of choices that they make each day.
Leaks to
because
media about confidential cabinet briefings, that's a sign that there may be a problem within your structure, right?
yeah. So, and it's really important that there's kind of two different things here because there are situations where there are leaks of confidential information that are like genuinely an issue,
Yeah.
right? And I'm aware that the commission is trying to crack down on that quite hard at the moment.
Hmm.
But there's also the enacting of the role of the public servant and some scenarios where this is kind of being undermined in small ways in terms of what's the advice that you're being given, what's the evidence that's being put in front of you. And those kinds of things can happen in quite subtle ways.
Yeah.
And so one of the things actually that was mentioned in that briefing paper that I just mentioned, they've noted actually that a local analysis that they cited in New Zealand has drawn attention to its more subtle forms, including politically responsive behaviour by public servants.
Okay.
But there is a live concern that this is happening.
From a free speech union's point of view, and just wanting to get a take on this one, in some cases, leaks from public servants about some backroom deal that's been done by our politicians is actually an example of free speech. We don't want to say, hey, we can
Yeah,
have no leaks to media from public servants, because that in itself goes in the opposite direction of free speech. But we also want to
yeah.
have ministers that can trust their employees, right?
Yes, so I make a really important distinction here, a clarification there, and I'm glad that you drew that out. Um, one one is politically sensitive information that would be kind of relevant to a process that is legitimately confidential through the political process.
Yep.
The other is seeing behaviors like this that are kind of, for example, bullying behaviors that we know are kind of very problematic in the public service at the moment.
Yeah.
Things about, as I just said, kind of little subtle ways of kind of undermining the process, these sorts of things. There needs to be a process in order for public servants to be able to speak out about that. Um, the Public Service Commission does have a process that they call speaking out.
Yep.
And so there are various channels to do that. But one of the recommendations that we've made with both the briefing paper and our submission for the Public Service Amendment Bill is to strengthen the channels of the speaking out process that are external to public servants' reporting lines.
Yep.
Because at the moment, the key ways that public servants can speak out about issues to do with things like bullying and undermining the process, the way to do that is to raise it with either their immediate superior or the one above them.
Yeah.
But of course, they are the ones who the public service census from last year showed are the most common source of bullying
Yeah.
itself.
Yeah.
So you're not exactly going to report bullying behavior about your manager to your manager, are
Yeah.
you?
Yeah.
So
Exactly.
what we've said is we need a process that is much stronger and more robust that public servants can access that is external to that reporting line.
And hey, there's a big difference between shining light on things that need a bit of attention and purposefully and secretly undermining government processes from within. Now, wanting to contrast this with perhaps an example of how things are done overseas in the United States, you get a new president, they clean out the office. You get a total change of government. All of the staff are the new president's staff, and you make sure that there is that everybody is online and on board with the ideology and policy of the incoming government. That's quite a process. It's probably extremely expensive and inefficient. But what would your response be to that? Is it worth the cost, or is this just another great example of perhaps government inefficiency to say, hey, I'm not working with this person, I didn't appoint them, I'm going to appoint some new people here? That throws up all sorts of other integrity issues.
Yeah. Well, I think there is no kind of perfect system, right? But I think that the way that we've got it here actually is a good way of doing it, would be
Okay.
my opinion. because the institutional knowledge that you stand to gain from having a public service that remains steady
Yep.
as governments come in and out, I think there's a lot to be said for that. It's just the difficulty is where that public service itself gets politicized. So that's why we need to be really on guard for politicization in the public service. We actually raised concerns back in May with Sir Brian Roach, who's the Public Service Commissioner, about politicization in the public service.
Yep.
He'd made some comments on a Q&A session with Jack Tame that it wasn't an issue, and we heard that and thought, ugh. Like, we're hearing very much so from public servants that we're speaking with that it is an issue. And indeed, this briefing paper has drawn out that it is. So one of the recommendations that we've made in response to that long-term briefing paper that I mentioned is to actually conduct a full survey analysis of politicization in the public service.
Yep.
Because the way to kind of bulwark against what we're talking about is to ensure that that's not happening.
And hey, to have a reporting structure which doesn't necessarily mean that you need to report directly up the chain to your supervisor, who may be part of the problem in that regard. So not just integrity, but transparency in this particular process. Hey, thank you so much for the work that you do in this space. Hey, we get to elect our MPs perhaps, but to make sure that our civil service is also accountable and demonstrating integrity, also an important part of the process. Stephanie, thanks for what you do at Free Speech Union. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Andrew. Really appreciate it.
Hey, thanks very much for joining us in the Rhema studio. Thanks very much for watching the interview. It's kind of nice to have an audience, actually. And if you did like what you watched, then do give us a like, do give us the thumbs up. And if you'd like to see more interviews like that one, or perhaps even better, subscribe and those interviews will come straight to you. Don't forget to turn on your notifications, and we'll see you in the next one. Cheers.